Good morning, everyone. Today is Tuesday, and today we will talking about the penguins. Everybody know penguins, right? And they really cute, right? Look at them. And yes, they cute. Mm-hmm. Yep. The penguin is cute, and they bird. They have a wing, but they cannot fly. Okay, because look at that penguin right there. Most of the penguin they live in the north on the southern. Okay, only one Galapagos penguin is live in the south, and more all the other penguin will live on the south. And penguin they have a different kind, about 17, 19 species of penguin. They look similar. The basic color of the penguin is black and white. Okay, and penguin live near to the water. They are very good diver. They excellent. Okay, um, and they live in a big group. They have a group like a million, thousand, million penguin live together. Okay, and they found out penguin fossil about 62 million years ago. This means penguins been here for a very long time. And in this morning, Ken told me the dinosaur is about 65 million years ago. So penguin 62 million years ago. So it's they not very close with the dinosaur, right? Okay, so right now I want to show you a little bit of the different type of penguin. So they a little bit different, not a lot, but still you can tell. Just like this one, you see they black and white, and they have a little line black underneath their beak there, and the wing this one looks pink, right? So we will see to the other penguin to see how they look like, how the different they are. Okay, so we go to the next one will be the emperor penguin. Okay, the name is the emperor, and this one they have a little bit tail there, and you see they have a yellow on their head right there next to their ear. Okay, so that's the emperor penguin. Okay, and we go to the next one. Let's see what is that? The king penguin. This one have a yellow too, but you see they have a yellow from their pink, their ear and the neck too. Okay, so that's a little bit different there. Okay, and let's see. A little more humble penguin. Look at this one. This one is not have yellow, they have a black, and they have a light black in front of the chest there. So, and you need to know that penguin they very good with swimming. They are excellent diver. They swim very fast. Okay. Okay. So let's see. Do we have more? I don't remember. Okay. Oh, right here.
That one's cute.
Yeah, this one cute, huh? And look at this one similar like the one we just watched, but this one have a two black line in front of them. See? Okay, so that's a Magellanic penguin. Okay, and I think we still have some more to show you. That where is this one go?
It's hiding behind the snow.
It's hiding. Maybe I.
Behind the snow.
Oh yes, you're right. Oh, look at this one. Oh,
Those are cute.
you see this one?
Oh.
Anyone watch the movie Surf Up?
Yeah, I watched
You
it.
did that? So that kind of the penguin right there. You see, they have a little bit hair, up hair, yellow one. That's the movie Surf Up. That kind of the penguin. Okay, and they have a one little penguin. They're really small. Okay, so let's see. That one right there. They a little one. See, and they're really cute, huh?
Oh, the babies are cute.
Yeah, they the little one. They not the baby. But that kind of penguin is smaller than the other one. So they call them the little penguin. Okay, I think that's it. I believe so. Oh, I still want more. Okay. So you see, we have a lot of penguins, right? They look a little bit different. Look at this one, very cold. Look at everything cold and freeze around them. See, look really cold there. And this one called the chin strap penguins. Okay. Yeah. So and look at that one. They just a little thin line underneath their picture. Yeah. Look like they have something there. Okay, so they're really cute, and I think that's good. Thank you, comment. So they say penguin have a lot of different kind of penguin, and they just a little bit different. But the basic color that's the black and white, and the black and white is color to help them camouflage because in the snow when it a lot of snow it everywhere is white, right? So the black will blend in with the white snow around them, and the black top when they take to the rock or something. So that's why the black and white is a color for them to camouflage with the environment behind around them. Okay, and do you think the penguin can fly? Who think the penguin can
We talked
fly?
about this morning. Can penguins fly?
Yes,
Well,
Yes or no?
yes, they can.
how though?
They fly like this and
In the air or in the water?
in the air.
Okay, who else? Can penguins fly, guys?
Yes.
We talk-
water.
In the water. You're right.
Under the
Vicky.
water,
I
okay?
confused, Grace.
Because you know why they cannot fly in the sky? Penguin is kind of bird, but they cannot fly up on the sky, but they can fly through the water. Because you see their body, they have a very heavy body, right? But the wing is too short and too small. So when it's short and small and the body is too heavy, they cannot live up on the sky, okay? So that's why they cannot fly up on the sky, but they can fly through the water, and they can fly through the water very fast.
I
The
was confused, Carmen.
hmm?
I was confused up here.
It's okay. We're gonna
It's not a competition.
No. So and the penguin very smart. They said
My school never
penguin really smart. People can train them. They can learn things and they can use some tool equipment if we train them to do. Okay, so basically, penguin is cute and it's good, and we can train them. They kind of the intelligent animals. Some animal really smart. We can train them. Some not. And penguin is the one kind of the intelligent animal here. We can train them. And today I will show you how to draw a penguin. Okay, everybody ready? You have your paper and pencil, right? Okay, so let's go. Let's start to do this. Oops. Okay, you can see. Okay, so this is the penguin. The penguin is very easy to do. Okay, so and they have a thick body. Okay, just like the egg. So just start from this side first. Okay, just one line like that first. Okay, so we will draw the thick here. That's the head, right? Okay. Okay, so now one more line on this side. Okay. Everybody can see, right?
Yeah.
Okay, so they have a wing. So two wings, one on this side, one on the other side. Okay, So let's see. Okay, the other one, you just stop right here. Okay, so you have two wings. And now, let's see, the leg. Okay. They have a very sharp leg. Just simple like that. Okay, and one right here. You know these animals, they swimming under the ocean, under the water. So their leg is different with the animal on the land. Okay, this one you see like the leg of the duck, whatever. They can go under the water. They have a different kind of leg like that. They connect together. Just like this, easy for you. Just three lines.
3 lines.
Just three lines like
You
that.
went too fast, but I'm trying.
Okay. And this one have a little bit tail.
Doesn't matter how it goes, right, Grace?
So you have a little bit tail right here. So you can have some tail too. Okay.
That's the tail.
That's the tail. And now
Where's the eye?
so we will go to do the eye here. Where can the eye be? It will be somewhere right here, right?
Yeah.
And you see the penguin, they most of them is the black, the head is black and the back is black, right? So we will have the line like that. So this one you can color black here and a little bit right here. Okay. And this one you will color black, so you have one more line right here. And one more line on this side. So this part right here, you can color it black here. Right, this one black. Black. Okay. So now you have your penguin. Okay. So who finished your penguin and want to show your friend? Okay. Okay, Mark Naira first. Okay. Mark Naira first.
Can I go after?
Sure.
Not going to do your face. Are you done, Shannon? Awesome. You can take it to
Okay,
show.
Mark, come here and show your friend. Okay. This one. Okay, so Mark Naira penguin right here. So that's it, Mark. Thank you, Mark. Okay, good job. Okay, chicken, your turn.
Look at this one.
Okay, look at chicken. Come here, chicken. Show your friend. Nice. Okay, that's chicken, and that's her drawing right here. That's
Is that
her.
cute, Vanessa?
Oh, good job, chicken. Wow, good job. Yay. Okay, who next?
Shannon, go.
Shannon. Shannon. Roger, ready? After Shannon, okay? Okay, let's see Shannon. Penguin. Oh, nice. Up. Good job, Shannon. Wow, I am the penguin. Good job. Rochelle.
Did you draw one, Rochelle?
You did good job. And now you can color just black and white, okay? Let's see Rochelle Penguin, okay? Where is Penguin? Okay, that's Rochelle here. Okay, she colored that. Good job. Okay, Vicky. Okay, Mark Mattia, you ready after Vicky? Okay. Okay, let's see Vicky. Let's see Vicky here. Oh, so cute. Look at this. I like it. Very good, Vicky. Good job. Mark Mattia.
He's walking like a penguin too.
He look like a penguin too. Ah, yeah. This is the penguin. Okay, play around. Very good, Mark. Okay. Okay. Everybody did a very good job, and even Mark is going to walk like a penguin too. Okay, okay, that's good. Okay, thank you everyone, and see you next week. Okay,
What
thank
do we
you.
say to
Bye
Tweety? Thank you.
Thank you.
We're gonna go over here. Hello. Well, I am extra masked up right now, because the supervisors are wearing some extra masks because apparently a lot of people are getting germs in Orange County. So we are trying extra hard to make sure everyone is safe here. That's just what we do, right? So even though I'm okay, I'm gonna read you some more from this book, The Trumpet of the Swan. So far, we've had some little baby swans, which are called cygnets, born. I want to say there were 5 of them. Does that sound right to you guys? 5, the eggs hatch. And here is the mommy and daddy swan with the little babies, which they're born with their fur gray so they can kind of blend in with the marshland and other people won't come and fight them. So chapter 5 is called Lewis. One evening, a few weeks later, when the cygnets were asleep, the swan said to the cob, "Have you noticed anything different about one of our children, the one we call Lewis?" "Different?" replied the cob. "In what way is Lewis different from his brothers and sisters?" "Lewis looks all right to me. He's growing well. He swims and he dives beautifully. He eats well. He will soon have his flight feathers." "Oh, he looks all right," said the swan. "And heaven knows he eats enough. He's healthy and bright and a great swimmer. But have you ever heard Lewis make any sound as the others do? Have you ever heard him use his voice or say anything? Have you ever heard him utter a single beep or a single burble?" Oh, I remember the baby swans before were saying to their mom, they were saying beep. "Come to think of it, I never have," replied the cob. He's starting to look worried. "Have you ever heard Lewis say good night to us, as the others do? Have you ever heard him say good morning, as the others do in their charming little way, burbling and beeping?" "Now that you mention it, I never had," said the cob. "Goodness, what are you getting at?" "Well, do you wish me to believe that I have a son who is defective in any way? Such a revelation would distress me greatly. I want everything to go smoothly in my family life so that I can glide gracefully and serenely now in the prime of my life without being haunted by worry or disappointment. Fatherhood is quite a burden at best. I do not want the added burden of having a defective child, a child that has something the matter with him. Well, said the wife, I've been watching Louis lately. It is my opinion the little fellow can't talk. I've never heard him make one sound. I think he came into the world lacking a voice. If he had a voice, he'd use it as same as the others do. Why, this is terrible, said the cob. This is distressing beyond words. This is a very serious matter. His wife looked at him kind of like she was laughing at him. It's not too serious now, she said, but it will be serious 2 or 3 years from now when he falls in love, as he surely will do. A young male swan will be greatly handicapped in finding a mate if he is unable to say, "Hoo-hoo, hoo-hoo," or if he can't utter the usual endearments to the young female of his choice. Are you sure? Asked the cob. Certainly I'm sure, she replied. I can remember perfectly well the springtime years ago when you fell in love with me and began chasing after me. What a sight you were, and what a lot of noise you made. It was in Montana, remember? Of course I remember, said the cob. Well, the thing that attracted me most to you was your voice, your wonderful voice. It was, said the cob. Yes, you had the finest, most powerful, most resonant voice of any of the young male swans in the Red Rock Lakes National Wildlife Refuge in Montana. Say that 3 times real fast. I did, said the cob. Yes, indeed. Every time I heard you say something in that deep voice of yours, I was ready to go anywhere with you. Where? Asked the cob. He was obviously delighted with his wife's praise. It tickled his vanity and made him feel great. He had always fancied himself as having a fine voice, and now to hear it from his wife's own lips was a real thrill. In the pleasure of the moment, he forgot all about Louis and thought entirely of himself. And of course, he did remember that enchanted springtime on the lake in Montana when he had fallen in love. He remembered how pretty the swan had been, how young and innocent she seemed, how attractive, how desirable. Now he realized fully that he would never have been able to woo her and win her if he had been unable to say anything. We'll not worry about Louis for the time being, said the swan. He's still very young, but we must watch him next winter when we are in Montana for the season. We must stay together as a family until we see how Louis makes out. She walked over to where her sleeping cygnets were and settled down next to them. The night was chilly. Carefully, she lifted one wing and covered the cygnets with it. They stirred in their sleep and drew close to her. You're gonna get warm, huh? The cob stood quietly, thinking about what his wife had just told him. He was a brave, noble bird, and already he was beginning to work out a plan for his son Louis. If it's really true that Louis has no voice, said the cob to himself, then I shall provide him with a device of some sort to enable him to make a lot of noise. There must be some way out of this difficulty. After all, my son is a trumpeter swan. He should have a voice like a trumpet. But at first, I will test him to make certain that what his mother says is true. But in fact, the cob was unable to sleep that night. He stood on one leg quietly, but sleep never came. The next morning, after everyone had enjoyed a good breakfast, he led Louis apart from the others. Louis, he said, I wish to speak to you alone. Let's just you and I take a swim by ourselves to the other end of the pond where we can talk privately without being interrupted. Well, Louis was surprised by this, but he nodded his head and followed his father, swimming strongly in his wake. He did not understand why his father wanted to speak to him alone, without his brothers and sisters. Now, said the cob, when they reached the upper end of the pond, here we are, gracefully floating, supremely buoyant, at some distance from the others, and in perfect surroundings. A fine morning with the pond quiet, except for the song of the blackbirds making the air sweet. I wish my father would get to that point, thought Lewis. This is an ideal place for our conference, continued the cob. There is something I feel I should discuss with you very candidly and openly, something that concerns your future. We need not range over the whole spectrum of bird life, but just confine our talk to the one essential thing that is before us on this unusual occasion. Oh, I wish my father would get to the point, thought Lewis, who by this time was getting very nervous. It has come to my attention, Lewis, continued the cob, that you rarely say anything. In fact, I can't recall ever hearing you utter a sound. I have never heard you speak or say, "Hoo-hoo!" or cry out, either in fear or in joy. This is most unusual for a young trumpeter. It is serious. Lewis, let me hear you say beep. Go ahead, say it. Beep. Poor Lewis. While his father watched, he took a deep breath, opened his mouth, and let out the air out, hoping it would say beep. But there wasn't a sound. Well, try again, Lewis said. Try again, Lewis, said his father. Perhaps you're not making enough of an effort. Lewis tried again. It was no use. No sound came from his throat. He shook his head sadly. Well, watch me, said the cob. He raised his neck to its full height and cried, "Ho-ho!" so loud it was heard by every creature for miles around. Now let me hear you go beep, he commanded. Say beep, Lewis, loud and clear. Lewis tried, but he couldn't beep. Here is Lewis's big, handsome father and little Lewis trying to make noises out of his throat, and nothing is coming out. Well, let me hear you burble. Go ahead and burble, like this. Burble, burble, burble. Lewis tried to burble, but he couldn't do it. No sound came. Well, said the cob, I guess it's no use. I guess you are dumb. Well, that wasn't very nice of him to say. When he heard the word dumb, Lewis felt like crying. The cob saw that he had hurt Lewis's feelings. You misunderstand me, my son, he said in a comforting voice. You failed to understand my use of the word dumb, which has two meanings. If I had called you a dumb cluck or a dumb bunny, that would have meant that I had a poor opinion of your intelligence. Actually, I think you are perhaps the brightest, smartest, most intelligent of all my cygnets. But words sometimes have two meanings. The word dumb is such a word. A person who can't see is called blind. A person who can't hear is called deaf. A person who can't speak is called dumb. It simply means that he can't say anything. Do you understand? Lewis nodded his head. He felt better, and he was grateful for his father to explaining that the word had two meanings. He still felt very unhappy, though. So we all know people that are blind, and maybe we know someone who is deaf, and maybe we know someone who is dumb. There are some people here at Elwyn that rarely talk. I don't know if you would call them dumb. Sometimes they do make sounds, but usually they can't express themselves well, so maybe they just scream. We know people like that here at Elwood too. So doesn't mean that there's anything wrong with him. He just cannot make a sound. So his father continued, do not let an unnatural sadness settle over you. Swans must be cheerful, not sad, graceful, not awkward, brave, not cowardly. Remember that the world is full of youngsters who have some sort of handicap that they must overcome. You apparently have a speech defect. I am sure you will overcome it in time. There may even be some slight advantage at your age in not being able to say anything. It compels you to be a good listener. The world is full of talkers, but it is rare to find anyone who listens. And I assure you that you can pick up more information when you are listening than when you are talking. My father does do quite a lot of talking himself, thought Louis. Some people, continued the cob, go through life chattering and making a lot of noise with their mouth, but they never really listen to anything. They are too busy expressing their opinions, which are often unsound or based on bad information. Therefore, my son, be of good cheer. Enjoy life. Learn to fly. Eat well. Drink well. Use your ears. Use your eyes. And I promise that someday I will make it possible for you to use your voice. There are mechanical devices that can convert air into beautiful sounds. One such device is called a trumpet. I saw a trumpet once in my travels. I think you may need a trumpet in order to live a full life. I've never known a trumpeter swan to need a trumpet, but your case is different. I intend to get you what you need. I don't know how I'll manage this, but in the fullness of time it shall be accomplished. And now that our talk has come to a close, let me return gracefully to the other end of the pond, where your mother and your brothers and sisters await us. The cob turned and swam off. Louis followed. It had been an unhappy morning for him. He felt frightened at being different from his brothers and sisters. It scared him to be different. He couldn't understand why he had come into the world without a voice. Everyone else seemed to have a voice. He couldn't. Why didn't he? Fate is cruel, he thought. Fate is cruel to me. Then he remembered that his father had promised to help, and he felt better. Soon they joined the others, and everyone started water games, and Louis joined in, dipping and splashing and diving and twisting. Louis could splash water farther than any of the others, but he couldn't shout while he was doing it. To be able to shout while you're splashing water is half of the fun. Ooh, and look, here's the little family. The cygnets are getting bigger. They're not all gray now. This chapter 6 is called Off to Montana. At the end of the summer, the cob gathered his family around him and made an announcement. Children, he began, I have news for you. Summer is drawing to a close. Leaves are turning red on the trees. They are turning pink and pale yellow. Soon the leaves will fall. The time has come for us to leave this pond. It is time for us to go, cried all the cygnets, except certainly, replied their father. You children are old enough to learn the facts of life, and the principal fact of our life right now is this. We can't stay in this marvelous location much longer. Well, why not? Cried out all the cygnets, except Louis. Because summer is over, said the cob, and it is the way of swans to leave their nesting site at summer's end and travel south to a milder place where the food supply is good. I know that you are all fond of this pretty pond, this marvelous marsh, these reedy shores and restful retreats. You have found life pleasant and amusing here. You have learned to dive and swim underwater. You have enjoyed our daily recreational trips when we formed in line, myself in front, swimming gracefully, like a locomotive, and your charming mother bringing up the rear, like a caboose. Day long you have listened and learned. You have avoided the odious otter and the cruel coyote. You have listened to the little owl that says, hoo 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 hoo. You have heard the partridge say, quit quit. At night you have dropped off to sleep to the sound of frogs, the voices of the night. Oh, thank God I don't have to try to do that noise. But these pleasures and pastimes, these adventures, these games and frolics, these beloved sights and sounds must come to an end. All things come to an end, and it is time for us to go. Well, where will we go? Cried all the cygnets, except Lewis. Where will we go? Hoo, hoo, hoo. Where will we go? Hoo, 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 hoo. We will fly south to Montana, replied the cob. What is Montana? Asked all the cygnets, except Lewis. What is Montana? Banana, banana. What is Montana? Banana, banana. I don't know, maybe they're going to go see Hannah Montana. I don't know. Montana, said their father, is a state of the Union. And there, in a lovely valley surrounded by high mountains, are the Red Rock Lakes, which nature has designed especially for swans. In these lakes, you will enjoy warm water arising from hidden springs. Here, ice never forms, no matter how cold the nights. In the Red Rock Lakes, you will find other trumpeter swans, as well as the lesser waterfowl, the geese, and the ducks. There are a few enemies. No, yeah, sorry, there are no gunners. Plenty of, I don't know what that means, sorry, plenty of muskrat houses, free grain, games every day. What more can a swan ask in the long cold of winter? Lewis listened to all this in amazement. He wanted to ask his father how they could learn to fly and how they could find Montana even after they learned to fly. He began worrying about getting lost, but he wasn't able to ask any questions. He just had to listen. One of his brothers spoke up, though. Father, he said, you said we would fly south. I don't know how to fly. I've never been up in the air. True, replied the cob, but flying is largely a matter of having the right attitude. Plus, of course, good wing feathers. Flying consists of three parts. First, the takeoff, during which there is a lot of fuss and commotion, a lot of splashing and rapid beating of the wings. Second, the ascent or gaining of altitude. This requires hard work and fast wing action. Third, the leveling off, the steady elevated flight high in the air, wings beating slower now, beating strongly and regularly, carrying us swiftly and surely from zone to zone as we cry, ho-ho, ho-ho, with all the earth stretched out far below. Oh, that sounds really nice, said the cygnet, but I'm not sure I can do it. I might get dizzy up there. What if I look down? Well, don't look down, said his father. Look straight ahead and don't lose your nerves. Besides, we swans do not get dizzy. They feel wonderful in the air. They feel exalted. Well, what does exalted mean? Asked the cygnet. It means you will feel strong, glad, firm, high, proud, successful, satisfied, powerful, and elevated, as though you had conquered life and had a high purpose. Oh, that sounds good. Lewis listened to all of this with great attention. The idea of flying frightened him. I won't be able to say "coho," he thought. Wonder whether a swan can fly if he has no voice and can't say "coho." I think, said the cob, that the best plan is for me to demonstrate flying to you. I will make a short exhibition flight while you watch. Observe everything I do. Watch me pump my neck up and down before I take off. Watch me test the wind by turning my head this way and that. The takeoff must be into the wind. It's much easier that way. Watch how I raise my great wings See how I beat them furiously as I rush through the water with my feet going like mad. This frenzy will last for a couple hundred feet, at which point I will suddenly be airborne. Whee! My wings still chopping the air with terrific force, but my feet no longer touching the water. Then watch what I do. Watch how I stretch my long, white, elegant neck out ahead of me until it has reached its full length. Watch how I retract my feet and allow them to stream out behind full length until they extend beyond my tail even. Hear my cries as I gain the upper air and start trumpeting. See how strong and steady my wing beat has become. Then watch me bank and turn, set my wings, and glide down. And just as I reach the pond again, watch how I shoot my feet out in front of me and use them for the splashdown, as though they were a pair of skis. Having watched all this, then you and your mother too, and we will all make a practice flight together until you get the hang of it. Then tomorrow we will do it again. And instead of returning to the pond, we will head south to Montana. Are you ready for my exhibition flight? Ready, cried Ignis, except Lewis. Well, very well, here I go, cried the cob, and here he's stretching his neck out and his wings out and getting ready to take off there. As the others watched, he swam downwind to the end of the pond, turned, tested the wind, pumped his neck up and down, trumpeted. It doesn't say this, but that means hoo-hoo. And after a rush of 200 feet, wow, that's a long way, got into the air and began gaining altitude. His long white neck stretched out ahead, his big black feet stretched behind. His wings had great power. The beat slowed as he settled into sustained flight. All eyes watched. Lewis was more excited than he had ever been. I wonder if I can really do it, he thought. Suppose I fail. Then the others will fly away, and I will be left here all alone in this deserted pond, with winter approaching, and no father, and no mother, and no sisters, no brothers, and no food to eat when the pond freezes over. I will die of starvation. I'm scared. In a few minutes, the cob glided down out of the sky and skidded to a stop on the pond. They all cheered. Hoo-hoo, hoo-hoo, beep, beep, beep. All but Lewis. He had to express his approval simply by beating his wings and splashing water in his father's face. All right, said the cob. You've seen how it's done. Follow me and we'll give it a try. Extend yourselves to the utmost. Do everything in the proper order. Never forget for a minute that you are swans and therefore excellent flyers. And I'm sure all will be well. Well, look, they're taking off, all of them. Ta-da! There they go. They all swam downwind to the end of the pond. They pumped their necks up and down. Lewis pumped his harder than any of the others. They tested the wind by turning their heads this way and that. Suddenly, the cob signaled for the start. There was a tremendous commotion, wings beating, feet racing, water churned to a froth, and presently, wonder of wonders, there were 7 swans in the air, 2 pure white ones and 5 dirty gray ones. The takeoff was accomplished, and they started gaining altitude. Yay! Lewis was the first of the young cygnets to become airborne, and ahead all of his brothers and sisters. The minute his feet lifted clear of the water, he knew he could fly. It was a tremendous relief, as well as a splendid sensation. Boy, he said to himself, I never knew flying could be such fun. This is great. This is sensational. This is superb. I feel exalted and I'm not dizzy. I will be able to get to Montana with the rest of the family. I may be defective, but at least I can fly. The 7 great birds stayed aloft about a half an hour, then returned to the pond, the cob still in the lead. They all had a drink to celebrate the successful flight. The next day they were up early. It was a beautiful fall morning with mist rising from the pond and the trees shining in all colors. Toward the end of the afternoon, as the sun sank low in the sky, the swans took off from the pond and began their journey to Montana. "This way!" cried the cob. He swung left and straightened out on a southerly course. The others followed, trumpeting as they went. As they passed over the camp where the Sam Beaver was, Sam heard them and ran out. He stood watching as they grew smaller and smaller in the distance and finally disappeared. Excuse me. "What was it?" asked his father when Sam returned indoors. "Swans," he said. "They're headed south." "Well, we'd better do the same," said Mr. Beaver. "I think Shorty will be here tomorrow to take us out." Mr. Beaver lay down on his bunk. "What kind of swans were they?" he asked. "Trumpeters," said Sam. "That's funny," said Mr. Beaver. "I thought trumpeter swans had quit migrating. I thought they spent the whole year on the Red Rock Lakes, where they are protected." "Most of them do," replied Sam, "but not all of them." It was bedtime, so Sam got out his diary, and this is what he wrote. "I heard the swans tonight. They are headed south. It must be wonderful to fly at night. I wonder whether I'll ever see one of them again. How does a bird know how to get from where he is to where he wants to be?" Well, chapter 7 is school days. Is that for the swans or is that for Sam? A few days after the swans arrived in their winter home on the Red Rock Lakes, Lewis had an idea. He decided since he was unable to use his voice, he should learn to read and write. If I'm defective in one respect, he said to himself, I should try and develop myself along other lines. I will learn to read and write. Then I will hang a small slate around my neck and carry chalk and a pencil. That way, I will be able to communicate with anybody who could read. Of course, or if the other swans can read, but is he going to write out Coho? Lewis liked company, and he already had many friends on the lakes. The place was a refuge for waterfowls or water birds, swans, geese, ducks, and other waterfowl. They lived there because it was a safe place and because the water stayed warm even in the coldest winter weather. Lewis was greatly admired for his ability as a swimmer. He liked to compete with other cygnets to see who could swim underwater the greatest distance and stay down the longest. When Lewis had fully made up his mind about learning to read and write, he decided to visit Sam Beaver and get help from him. Wow. Perhaps, thought Lewis, Sam will let me go to school with him, and the teacher will show me how to write. The idea excited him. He wondered whether a young swan would be accepted in a classroom full of children. He wondered whether it was hard to learn to read. So most of all, he wondered whether he could find Sam. Montana is a big state, and he wasn't even sure Sam lived in Montana, but he hoped he did. The next morning, when his parents were not looking, Lewis took off into the air. He flew northeast. When he came to the Yellowstone River, he followed it to the sweet grass country. When he saw a town beneath him, he landed next to the schoolhouse and waited for the boys and girls to be let out. Lewis looked at every boy, hoping to see Sam, but Sam wasn't there. Oh, wrong town, wrong school, thought Lewis. I'll try again. He flew off and found another town and located the school, but all the boys and girls had gone home for the day. I'll just have a look around anyway, thought Lewis. He didn't dare walk down the main street, for fear somebody would shoot him, because, it's a bird, yeah. So instead, he took to the air and circled around, flying low and looking carefully at every boy in sight. After about 10 minutes, he saw a ranch house where a boy was splitting wood near the kitchen door. The boy had black hair. Lewis glided down. Oh, I'm lucky, he said. He thought, it's Sam. When Sam saw the swan, he laid down his axe and stood perfectly still. Lewis walked up timidly, then reached down and untied Sam's shoelace. Remember how he did that before? And now here he is at Sam's house, and he's pulling out his shoelace, just like he did before. Well, Sam should know it's him then. I know you, said Sam. You're the one that never said anything and used to pull my shoelaces. Lewis nodded. Well, I'm glad to see you, said Sam. What can I do for you? Well, I can't say anything. So Lewis just stared straight ahead. Are you hungry? Asked Sam. Lewis shook his head. Thirsty? Lewis shook his head. Do you want to stay overnight with us here at the ranch? Asked Sam. Lewis nodded his head and jumped up and down. Okay, said Sam. We have plenty of room. It's just a question of getting Father's permission. Sam picked up his axe, laid a stick of wood on the chopping block, and split the stick neatly down the middle. That's when you take tree branches or logs and you chop them down the middle to make them smaller. You just can't put the whole thing in the fireplace. It's too big. There's something wrong with your voice, isn't there? He asked. Lewis nodded, pumping his neck up and down hard. He knew Sam was his friend, although he didn't know that Sam had once saved his mother's life. So you remember when he got up and didn't he throw a rock or something to scare away scare off some predators? In a few minutes, Mr. Beaver rode into the yard on a cow pony. Cow pony? He got off and tied his pony to a rail. What have you got there? He asked Sam. It's a young trumpeter swan, said Sam. He's only a few months old. Will you let me keep him a while? Well, said Mr. Beaver, I think it's against the law to hold one of these wild birds in captivity, but I'll phone the game warden and see what he says. If he says yes, you can keep him. Well, tell the warden the swan has something the matter with him, called Sam as his father started towards the house. What's wrong with him? Asked his father. He has a speech problem, replied Sam. Something's wrong with his throat. What are you talking about? Who ever heard of a swan with a speech problem? Well, said Sam, this is a trumpeter swan that can't trumpet. He's defective. He can't make a sound. Mr. Beaver looked at his son as though he didn't know whether to believe him or not. But he went into the house, and in a few minutes he came back. The warden says you can keep the young swan here for a while if you can help him. So, let's see. But sooner or later, the bird will have to go back to the Red Rock Lakes where he belongs. The warden said he wouldn't let just anybody have a swan, but he'd let you have one because you understand about birds and he trusts you. Well, that's quite a compliment, son. Mr. Beaver looked pleased. Sam looked happy. Lewis was greatly relieved. After a while, everyone went into supper in the kitchen of the ranch house. Mrs. Beaver allowed Lewis to stand beside Sam's chair. They fed him some corn and some oats, which tasted good. When Sam was ready for bed, he wanted Lewis to sleep in his room with him, but Mrs. Beaver said no, he'll mess up the room. He's no canary, he's enormous. Put the bird out in the barn. He can sleep in one of the empty stalls where horses won't mind. The next morning, Sam took Lewis to school with him. Sam rode his pony, and Lewis flew along. At the schoolhouse, the other children were amazed to see this great bird his long neck and bright eyes and big feet? Sam introduced him to the teacher of the first grade. Say this name, Mrs. Hammerbotham, who was short and fat, just like me. Sam explained that Lewis wanted to read and write because he was unable to make any sound with his throat. Mrs. Hammerbotham stared at Lewis. Then she shook her head. No, no birds. I've got enough trouble. Sam looked disappointed. Please, Mrs. Hammerbotham, he said, please let him stand in your class and learn to read and write. Well, why does a bird need to know how to read and write? She said. Only people need to communicate with one another. Well, that's not quite true, Mrs. Hammerbotham, said Sam. If you'll excuse me for saying so, I have watched birds and animals a great deal. All birds and animals talk to one another. They really have to in order to get along. Mothers have to talk to their young. Males have to talk to females, particularly in the spring of the year when they're in love. In love, said Mrs. Hammerbotham, who seemed to perk up at the suggestion. What do you know about love? And here she is holding her hand up and saying, no. And the other kids are all watching, and Sam is talking to Mrs. Higginbotham. Hear about love. Sam blushed. Well, what kind of a bird is he? She asked. He's a young trumpeter swan, said Sam. Right now, he's sort of a dirty gray color, but in another year, he'll be the most beautiful thing you ever saw. Pure white with a black bill and black feet. He was hatched last spring in Canada and now lives in the Red Rock Lakes. But he can't say coho the way the other swans can. And this puts him at a terrible disadvantage. Why? Said the teacher. Well, because it does, said Sam. If you wanted to say coho and couldn't make a single solitary sound, wouldn't you feel worried? Well, I don't want to say coho, replied the teacher. I don't even know what it means. Anyway, this is all just foolishness, Sam. What makes you think a bird can learn to read and write? It's impossible. Hey, give him a chance, pleaded Sam. He's well behaved and he's bright, and he's got this very serious speech defect. Well, what's his name? Well, I don't know, replied Sam. Well, Mrs. Hammerbotham said, if he's coming into my class, he's got to have a name. Maybe we can find out what it is. She looked at the bird. Is your name Joe? Lewis shook his head. Jonathan? Lewis shook his head.
What's my name?
Is it Donald? Lewis shook his head. Is your name Lewis? She asked the right question. Is your name Lewis? Asked Mrs. Hammerbotham. Lewis nodded his head very hard and jumped up and down and flapped his wings. Great Caesar's ghost, cried the teacher. Who else says that? Yeah, the Spider-Man's boss, remember? The Great Caesar's ghost. Look at those wings. Well, his name must be Lewis, that's for sure. All right, Lewis, you may join the class. Stand right here by the blackboard and don't mess up the room either. If you need to go outdoors for any reason, raise one wing. Lewis nodded. The first graders cheered. They liked the looks of the new pupil and were eager to see what he could do. Quiet, children, said Mrs. Hammerbotham. We will start with the letter A. She picked up a chalk and made a big A on the blackboard. Now you try it, Lewis. Lewis grabbed a piece of chalk in his bill and drew a perfect A right under the one the teacher had drawn. Cool. You see, said Sam, he's an unusual bird. Well, said Mrs. Hammerbotham, A is easy. I'll give him another, something harder letter. She wrote cat on the board. Let's see you write cat, Lewis. Lewis wrote cat. Well, cat is easy too, muttered the teacher. Cat is very easy because it is short. Can anyone think of a word that is longer than cat? Catastrophe, said Charlie Nelson, who sat in the first row. Good. That's a good word, said Mrs. Hammerbotham. That's a good hard word. But does anyone know what it means? What is a catastrophe? An earthquake, said one of the girls. Correct, replied the teacher. What else? War is a catastrophe, said Charlie Nelson. Correct, said Mrs. Hammerbotham. What else is? A very small, red-headed girl named Jenny raised her hand. Yes, Jenny, what is a catastrophe? In a very small, high voice, Jenny said, when you get ready to go on a picnic with your father and mother and you make peanut butter sandwiches and jelly rolls and put them in a thermos box with bananas and an apple and some raisin cookies and paper napkins and some bottles of pop and a few hard-boiled eggs, and then you put the thermos box in your car, and just as you're starting out, it starts to rain. And your parents say there's no point in having a picnic in the rain. That is a catastrophe. Well, very good, Jenny, said Mrs. Hammerbotham. It isn't as bad as an earthquake, and it isn't as bad as war. But it is a catastrophe for a child, I guess. Anyway, catastrophe is a good word. No bird can write that word, I'll bet. If I can teach a bird to write catastrophe, it'll be book news all over the sweetgrass country. I'll get my picture in Life magazine. I'll be famous. Thinking of all those things, she stepped up to the blackboard and wrote catastrophe. Okay, she said, let's see you write that, Louis. Louis picked up a fresh piece of chalk in his bill. He was scared. He took a good look at the word. A long word, he thought. It's really no harder than a short one, right? I'll just copy it one letter at a time, and pretty soon it'll be finished. Besides, my life is a catastrophe. It's a catastrophe to be without a voice. So then he began writing. Catastrophe, he wrote, making each letter very neatly. When he got to the last letter, the pupils clapped and stamped their feet and banged on their desks, and one boy quickly made a paper airplane and zoomed it into the air. Mrs. Hammerbotham rapped for good order. Right, settle down there. There he is up at the board. He wrote catastrophe. Probably most of us can spell it even, but we could copy it like Louis did, right? So then she said, very good, Louis. She said, Sam, it's time you went to your own classroom. You shouldn't be in my room. Go and join the 5th grade. I'll take care of your friend, the Swan. Back in his own room, Sam sat down at his desk, feeling very happy about the way things had turned out. The 5th graders were having a lesson in arithmetic, and their teacher, Miss Annie Snug, greeted Sam with a question. Miss Snug was young and pretty. Sam, if a man can walk 3 miles in 1 hour, how many miles can he walk in 4 hours? It would depend on how tired he got after the first hour, replied Sam. The other pupils laughed, and Mrs. Snug rapped for order. Well, Sam is quite right, she said. I never looked at the problem that way before. I always supposed that the man could walk 12 miles in 4 hours. But Sam may be right. That man may not feel so spunky after the first hour. He may drag his feet. He may slow up. Albert Bigelow raised his hand. My father knew a man who tried to walk 12 miles, and he died of heart failure, said Albert. Oh, goodness, said the teacher. I suppose that could happen, too. Well, anything can happen in 4 hours, said Sam. A man might develop a blister on his heel. Or he might find some berries growing along the road and stop to pick them. That would slow him up even if he wasn't tired or didn't have a blister. It would indeed, agreed the teacher. Well, children, I think we have all learned a great about arithmetic this morning, thanks to Sam Beaver. And now, here is a problem for one of the girls in the room. Or if you are, this is so misogynist. If you are feeding a baby from a bottle and you give the baby 8 ounces of milk in one feeding, How many ounces of milk would the baby drink in 2 feedings? Linda Staples raised her hand. Linda Staples, she's got her hand up. About 15 ounces. I said 8 ounces, and now they doubled the time. So that should be 16 ounces. She says, about 15 ounces, she said. All right, well, why is that, said Miss Snug. Why wouldn't the baby drink 16 ounces? Because he spills a little each time, said Linda, and it runs out the corners of his mouth and gets on his mother's apron. By this time, the class was laughing so loudly the arithmetic lesson had to be abandoned. But everyone had learned how careful you have to be when dealing with figures. You want you guys to go a little longer, or it's like 11:40 now? So I think we'll save this next chapter for next time because it is titled Love. Could be good, right? So thank you for following along with me so far. I think this is a kind of a cute book. And we're gonna have to find out how little Lewis figures out how to communicate, right?
Yes.
So, since he cannot say hoo-hoo, hoo-hoo on his own.
I like the catastrophe part.
I know,
The little
catastrophe.
picnic.
Poor, oh, that is awful, huh? Can you imagine? It's like if we get all ready to go on an outing, right? And then all of a sudden we find out none of the vans have gas in them. It's like, oh my gosh, what are we going to do? So anyway, I hope you guys will listen along next time and we'll find out some more about Lewis falling in love. Thank you guys.
Thank you, Grace.
Grace, you're so
Hoo-hoo, hoo-hoo.
I can't even make that sound.